In a new development, the then Deputy Commissioner of Police Abba Kyari has demanded 500 million naira in damages against the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency over his alleged unlawful detention. In a fundamental right enforcement suit, Mr. Kyari also sought an order restraining the NDLEA and its agents, servants, privies, police, or anyone acting on their behalf from further harassing, detaining, intimidating, and arresting him unlawfully. Abba Kyari was on February 14 arrested on the allegation of his involvement in a case of illicit drug trafficking involving a perpetual transnational drug cartel. Mr. Kyari has since then been detained in their custody. Now, you will recall that the Super Corp has a pending allegation with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, over the hush puppy scandal. In the light of this, the alleged drug trafficking case, there's been speculation whether or not Abba Kyari can still be extradited for the initial allegation. And now joining us right here in the studio, we have a public affairs analyst, also a businessman, Dapo Adaramewa. Good morning, Dapo. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Then.
You did a decent job, well
done. Oh, thank you so much. Good
morning. Good to have you on board.
It's good to be here.
All right. Now, with the recent development with Abba Kyari, the NDLEA, the FBI, of course, the Super Corp. I saw something that said self-acclaimed, but then it wasn't self-acclaimed. It was given to him because no social media can say any kind of thing. So yes, with the Super Corp, the police, and that's the Super Corp in super problems. Now, of course, I read a story. The Ohanes Ndigbo had urged the federal government to allow Abba Kyari to be extradited to the US to face the allegation. What are your thoughts on the extradition?
I think there's a legal basis for it. For him to be extradited. Yeah, like illegal. The law does allow us to extradite our citizens to go face trial elsewhere. Now the issue is, should he face trial in Nigeria, obviously for the involvement in criminal activities here, the alleged, I must say, involvement in criminal activities here, or should he face trial abroad? Now, I think for the sake of justice being done in a fair and open court, I think it's better if he is extradited to go face charges abroad, because we all know there's no big men in the US. You know, there's nobody you can call to help bend the rules or bend the law, you know, all those kind of things. They don't exist. And looking at everything that's happened, it makes you wonder, you know, why he was even in the position. I mean, he had been suspended at the time he was, you know making arrests, you know, cutting deals and all of these kind of things. So it makes you question that, okay, if this man can be suspended, but yet still moving around with the full force of his office, you know, allegedly seizing drugs and, you know, obviously cutting deals and dealing drugs, as it has been alleged, then it makes you wonder if, while he's still in Nigeria, he can ever, you know, truly be tried in a fair and open court where...
Okay, just before you go, and I remember that the issue of that fraud case was before this particular case, even though there had been other allegations, several series of allegations against him before the hush puppy case was added to it. What happened? Why did it take so long before the federal government made up its mind on, you know, getting him out of Nigeria to go face the law? What happened? Why the delay? Is it a procedural issue? Is that how it's supposed to be?
I think, well, every Nigerian deserves the right to fair hearing, and hearsay is usually not enough for you to, you know, arrest somebody, because you look at the public domain. I don't think there's anybody in Nigeria's public domain that that somebody hasn't alleged has done something wrong. So I think the issue was there wasn't enough evidence, but in light of the US trial starting, or shall we say the request for his extradition, I think that was the point where, you know, the government could no longer afford to ignore these accusations, and so they were put in a position where they had to take action, and their action in this case was the suspension, which, you know, given everything that's happened, wasn't really
you know, you want to say you mentioned something about a suspension. I was going to ask you, I mean, why would someone be on suspension and at the same time keep acting? Is it that there are powers that are protecting him? Is it that it's become so much of a super cop that nobody else can fill that position? What exactly, what went wrong?
Well, we look at the antecedents of this country. You know, there's there's nothing that we should be surprised by. You know, our former EFCC chairman, you know, was, you know, the Senate didn't confirm him as the chairman, you know, and they had good reason, as we all know now, in light of all the scandal that came up after. But he was allowed to go on as acting chairman for years, you know. So we have situations where absurdities have become the normality, you know, like he's on suspension. He should be hidden away somewhere, but yet he's going around, you know, detaining and, you know, taking actions.
Doesn't that show that the suspension was just on paper and never in principle or practice?
I think.
And who should be held responsible for that?
Yeah, I think there needs to be the disciplinary arm within the police force needs to be examined as to why this man was still allowed to go ahead with the way he was behaving.
But then don't you think, or whether do you think that there is more like a cover-up process going on? Because listening to Femi Falana, SAN, talk in one of the stations, leading television stations yesterday, in his words he said the ball of the is in the courts of the Attorney General to initiate the extradition process, because he said materials have been submitted from after the allegations came up, material from the US submitted to the Nigerian government for the extradition process, but then according to him, he said nothing has been done. They're all laying low. So do you think there's a cover-up process regarding this issue? Don't forget the eyes of Nigeria in the international world, the scene of international scene, because people are watching.
Yeah. I think the government, by the evidence that we can see clearly, they're not really taking this very seriously, and one could suspect and infer that, you know, obviously somebody at his caliber and at his level being involved in, basically he's a drug dealer, a criminal, and if everything that has been said about him in terms of his involvement with Hush Puppy, he's also a kidnapper. You know, he detained somebody illegally outside of the realms of the law. So we're talking about a alleged kidnapper, drug dealer, you know, who knows, you know, what else he has done, you know. And this is a man who held one of the most powerful offices within law enforcement. So we can assume that he did have dealings with other people at his level, or who knows how many people are involved. And so there would naturally be a need for them to try and help him out of the situation, because if not, he'll start singing like a bird.
That brings me to the question: before someone is conferred with the position of a super cop, of course, the president did that in 2016. I guess so. And also, now you also mentioned the case of the former EFCC chairman. We saw what happened with the allegations here and there, and now there's a need for a background check with people who occupy such powerful positions in the society, and then after such awards and positions, they now come up later to say that they had some traces, or they have. That means there was not. It didn't start today. There's been traces from time immemorial. So you see that there's not enough background check done, or we need to do more, or there's some. Well, we know there's corruption in the system. Of course, there's corruption. But then, is it not? Is this something we should really look into before we expose ourselves too much outside?
Yeah, I think it's a very serious question, and in terms of, for me, I was actually thinking, like, how many more high-ranking officials are like this? How many more are
Abba Kyari's
involved
do we have
in this kind? Yeah, how many more Abba Kyari's have we not discovered currently? So it makes you worried, because these people have immense power. And in fact, earlier today, I was actually looking at the implications, because one of the things that we haven't spoken about is, what does this mean for all the people who have been arrested and convicted by Abba Kyari? If I was their lawyer, the first thing I would do is, you know, obviously challenge the entire case in court, because once it's been proven that a key officer in this case,
credibility of the case,
the credibility of the case is out now, and we're talking about kidnappers, you know, very famous criminals that this man managed to arrest, who could be back on the streets within the next 3 to 5 years as a result of this. So the impact of this is going to last very long, and talk about public trust. But then again, it's not new. You know, we've been talking about this. That's what NSAS was about, right? That's why we took to the streets and we said, you know what, these people, they're criminals among these elements. And that's what we were trying to get across, because everyday Nigerians have been seeing these criminals. They've been detained illegally by them. They've been searched. Drugs have been planted on them. And so we were right in that. But, you know, as we know, not much came of that. So
Looking at the IRT, now it's been disbanded, and then, you know, a good number of the officers have also been redeployed and all of that. But do you think that's enough punitive measure? What would you expect the, you know, federal government to do